There are secrets that palace swallow whole, secrets buried beneath the polished floors and the silk curtain, hidden inside the smiles of men who bow low but scheme higher. This is a story about one of those secrets, and the woman who refused to let it stay buried. Long before the kingdom knew her name, there was a queen, not the kind written about in every celebration books or painted soft colors or on the royal walls. She was kind of a queen who watched in silence, who listened, who understood, perhaps more than anyone alive, that the most dangerous weapon in the palace is not a sword, it is silence. And so she mastered it. She learned to read the pause before a man answered the question. She learned to notice which eyes shifted when certain names were spoken. She learned that betrayal that rarely arrives loudly. It tiptoes, it pours your wine, it holds your hand while reaching for your truth. She had seen it all, and she had seen it coming. Her underlying long before it arrived, before the illness took her hold, before the night grew longer than her strength could bear, the queen did something extraordinary. She found a girl, not a noble girl, not a girl born in a ceremony, not a girl born from a royal family. She found Zarima, fierce, restless, sharp. Zarima was intelligent, and she began to teach her. She taught her how to detect a lie, not from the words a person can speak, but from the breath they take before speaking them. She taught her how to navigate a room full of enemies without ever letting them know she had seen through every single one of them. She taught her survival, not the kind that keeps your body alive, but that kind that keeps your soul unbroken. And then on a night that the palace would later describe only as quiet, the queen died under circumstances that no one questioned loudly enough. But before she left the world, she left something behind, a message hidden so carefully that only someone who had truly learned from her would ever find it, and a message addressed to the king, a warning, a map of shadows pointing towards the truth, towards the men who had poisoned the well of his kingdom. Well, he trusted them completely. She was gone, but her plan was not gone. Now, a month later, the kingdom breathed differently. The king Jared moved through his own palace like a man moving through fog he could not name. The loss of his wife had merely broken his heart. It had fractured something deeper, his confidence, his sense of direction. And in that vacuum, as always happened, as it to be, when a powerful man becomes uncertain, other men rush in to fill the space. Ministers, chiefs, men who smile at the king's face and conspire behind his back, who had grown fat and comfortably feeding off the confusion of the court without its queens. The palace was quiet on the surface, but underneath it was rotting. It was rotting into something that could not be named. Now, then a particular day came, the day the queen was to be selected. Then a selection came and a formal search for new queen. The king exiled with hope. Perhaps he will have a new companion to restore the peace of the kingdom. Perhaps a new presence beside the throne will pull him back from the edge of his grief. Two women rose above the world, the rest of the people in the conversation, and they walked majestically towards the courtroom. Now there was Larina and there was also Zarima. Now, Larima was gentle, whose grace moved through a room like music. She smiled at the right moment, lowered her eyes abruptly, spoke with softness that made powerful men feel unthreatened. The people adore her, the palace chiefs adore her, even more because a gentle queen is an easy queen to control. A graceful woman who asks no difficult question is a dream for men who had secrets to keep. And then there was Zarima. She walked differently and she spoke differently. Where Laina presence suited, Zarima presence unsettled. And she knew it and she did not apologize for it. And she did not apologize for it when she stood up before the king and his council. She did not perform softness. She did not feel Amos, she spoke instead about truth, about partnership, about what it meant to stand beside a king, not as decoration, not as ceremony, but as a second pair of eyes in the world. that was active, trying to be blind by him. She spoke about strength not as threat but as a promise. The council shifted uncomfortably. This was not what they planned for. The king was silent for a long moment after she finished speaking. And then, to the shock of every person in that hall, the king chose Zarima. They were all surprised that why would the king choose the Zarima, the person who was outspoken, who does not fear anyone. The palace did not know what to do with Zarima. She was not what they understood. She did not fill her days with pleasantries and preparation for festivals. She observed. She walked at corridors and unusual hour. She sat in on meeting and she was not traditionally expected to attend to. That she attend meeting uninvited and she asked questions that landed in rooms like stones dropped in still water, and she watched the ripples. She began to notice things in the palace. Small thing at first, the way certain chiefs excused themselves whenever the king's health was discussed, the way medicine arrived for the king through particular hands and no others, the way information seemed to reach the wrong ears too quickly. Now she recognized the patterns not because she had seen them here before, but because a dying queen had once taught her and described everything to her the way it works, sitting by the candlelight in a voice that already knew it was running out of time. This was not a kingdom in mourning. This was a kingdom under quiet occupation, and the men doing the occupying had names. Zarima moved carefully, and she began one by one to remove officials whose loyalty had price tag, and she strengthened the kingdom daily routine, ensuring that was entered and he ensures that what the right people actually was in the court. His ears, his mind, each day came from sources she trusted. Slowly, quietly, she began to give the king back to himself and give the king back the rightful support that he deserved. And the two most powerful chiefs watched all of this with growing fury, and their names are not worth honoring here. What matters is what they decide to do. They spent years carefully positioning themselves as pillars of this kingdom, whereas they are the one destroying the kingdom from the what within, and they had fed off the grief of a king. They had many believe they contributed to the death of the first wife, the first queen, and now this woman, this impossible, inconvenient woman, that's Zarima, was dismantle every plan that they have. They have built piece by piece with nothing but her intelligence and her nerve. Now, they decided she had to be removed. They turned their attention towards Larina, the second person, which was not chosen. A beautiful, trusting Larina who still carried the quiet tinge of not being chosen. They found her in that wound and they walked it carefully, telling her that Zarima was dangerous and that she was manipulating the king to do what was not right, that someone had to act for good of the kingdom, and they wrapped their poison in the language of duty and honor. Larina, the person who did not know what they are scheming at, she genuinely believed and she loved the kingdom and listened. They told her what to do, and a cup of wine and a grand festival, simple and clean. Finally, Diana agreed, not because she was wicked, but because she has been made to believe and she was righteous. So Zarima knew all along all their scheming, all their plans. She had known for days before the festival arrived. She had the kind of knowledge that comes not from spy, but from paying attention, from watching a woman's face change in presence of certain men, from noticing a shift in the energy in the room, from understanding bone deep the way the trap is laid. The queen had taught her well, but Zarima did not stop it, not yet, because stopping it privately would mean that those two shifts would simply find another moment, another method, another means, another innocent hand to use. She needed them exposed, not whisper about, not quietly dismiss, exposed irrevocably, publicly, in front of every eye in the kingdom. So she let the festival come, and the hall was magnificent. That evening, torchlight everywhere, and everywhere was bright. Laughter, the performance of celebration was going on. And then Larina stepped forward, carrying a cup with both hands, her expression composed, rehearsed, believing she was doing something brave. Zarima looked at the cup, then she looked at the hall, then she spoke, not loudly, but in a voice that carried the weight, everything she had prepared for this moment. She declined the wine. She calmly, precisely, and before the confusion could settle, she began to speak. She explained everything, the conspiracy, the shifts, the plan. She did not rush, she did not raise her voice because the truth was already being exposed, and the lies and all the schemes are exposed. When it is solid, and she did not need to be shouted. She called for the cup to be set down, and a small animal in the hall drank from it. That was the taste for the poison. And within a moment, the animal was dead. Then the silence followed, and the loudest things anyone in that room had ever heard. And then she brought out the message that the late queen passed on to her. The late queen healing words, preserved and protected, finally reaching the hands that were always meant for. The king read it, standing up, and the people watched his face move through grief, through rage, through the terrible clarity of a man who finally understands what was done to the woman he loved, and why the shift who had stood in that hall for so many years as pillars of the power were suddenly just men, cornered, exposed, small. The small lioness sang where she stood, and not from a guilty of malice, but from the crushing weight of having been used, of having nearly done something she could never have done. Justice came swiftly, and the kingdom healed, the way the broken things do, slowly with visible scars, but with new kind of strength. And underneath, the people who had whispered about Zenzarima, who had doubted her, who had called her too sharp, too loud, too much, they saw her differently now, not because she had won, but because she had been right. She had waited, and she had not let fear make her flinched. Years passed. The King Jared, sitting one afternoon in the garden where his wife usually walk through, and sometimes pause and think about the night. He think about the night, the poison that was set on the table, and the woman beside him had let it reach the room. Had, he had trusted all the forces in the balance, but the truth eventually came in. He had believed that the right moment, and he had revealed completely what thousand interventions could have done, but choose not to do. He thought about the queen he had lost, the one who set all this in motion, the one who had looked at into the future from the edge of its own ending and planted a person inside like a seed. He thought about Zarima, and then it finally thought about everything that Eli's wife has planned in place to set the kingdom right and expose the wrong people. Then he thought to himself, the greatest gift a person can offer a kingdom is not loyalty that loyalty bends with wind, not elegance that suits why dangers grow, not silence that keep the peace but allow injustice to breathe. The greatest gift is someone willing to see clearly, speak honest, and stand completely unshakable in the fire of truth. Some queens wear their crowns like ornaments. Zarima wore her like armor, and the kingdom at last was safe.